This is one of the things we've been talking about for years. Back when I was at the University of Oklahoma, I often taught that there will be a storm come along at some point, which is going to hit Lake Pontchartrain. Lake Pontchartrain is like a thin teacup. It's going to splash back and forth. It's going to put stress on the levees. Once the levee breaks, you're going to get flooding, and it's not going to be like normal flooding, whereas normally what you expect is the storm surge comes inland, the water level rises, but after the storm passes, the water level falls. People either go back home or they can at least go back to their land, and we bring in trailers and things for them to live in while they recover. In this case, New Orleans is below sea level. Once the levee breaks, that water is not leaving anytime soon. We knew that was going to happen. We just didn't know the name of the storm, and of course now we know that was Katrina. But after Katrina, after Rita, after Wilma, NOAA released a press statement. This is November 29th, 2005, which says attributes recent increase in hurricane activity to naturally occurring multi-decadal climate variability. And in particular, they specifically said it is not related to greenhouse warming. One of the reasons we think that it might be is because if you look at the area of hurricane formation, imagine in a warmer world, the area of water greater than about 26 degrees Celsius means that longer period it will be warmer and more area will be warmer, which in theory should give us a longer season and potentially more intense storms. The question, though, is does that actually work out in reality? Because one of the things we know is that wind shear tends to destroy tropical storms. So if you have lots of wind shear, which is air moving at different heights, at different speeds, and in different directions, as the storm begins to build, it literally gets torn apart. So the question is, it's more than just simply water surface. And in this case, this is research by Phil Klotzbach, 2006, which said there's a large increasing trend in cyclone intensity and longevity for the North Atlantic, and a considerable decreasing trend for the Northeast Pacific. But if you notice, the other four basins show virtually no trend whatsoever. If this was a global signal, I'd expect to see it in most, if not all, basins. I certainly wouldn't expect to see it in one, rising conditions in one, a decrease in another, and virtually no trend in any of the final four. The North Atlantic obviously is the closest to us and the closest to North America, so we pay a lot of attention to it. In this case, one of the things you'll notice, measure of hurricane intensity, one of the things Klotzbach did was looked at data from 1984 to the early 2000s. Essentially what he did was to catch, in fact, a shift change. You'll notice we went from an active regime, which lasted until about the mid-1960s. There was an inactive hurricane regime in the North Atlantic until about 1995, and then the conditions sort of shifted again so that now we're in another 30-year active period. So that rising trend is real, but actually part of a larger trend which is really cyclical. So it's not necessarily related to anything happening later in the record. It's a natural cyclical process that we generally have seen. This is the accumulated cyclone energy for the entire globe. It's just a fancy way of saying let's take all the energy from all the tropical cyclones in all the basins, add them together, and keep a running total for 2 years. And in this case, you'll notice the current value is essentially as low as it's ever been over the last 35 years. So right now, our accumulated cyclone energy in tropical systems throughout the globe over the last 2 years has been as low as it's ever been for any 2-year period over the last 35 years. But nevertheless, what we continue to see, particularly in the media, is that somehow human activities directly lead us to increased hurricanes frequency and intensity. Finally, are sea levels rising dramatically? Is there a slow and steady climb, or is there a sudden increase in their frequency? Probably not of interest too much here in Wisconsin, but in Delaware, obviously, we are very much concerned. One of the things we've seen in the 20th century has been a sea level rise that's been just under about 7 inches, and it's been rather slow and steady. That is, you notice that curve is fairly linear. That is, there are a couple blips here and there, but in general, there has been a direct increase in sea level from 1900 to the year 2000. The scientific consensus says over the 20th century, sea levels globally have risen somewhere between 6 to 8 inches. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scientific assessment in 2001 suggested that based upon the scenarios by 2100, it would be somewhere between 6 and 34 inches, or not quite 3 feet. In the 2007, or the fourth assessment report, the summary for policymakers reduced the upper limit by about a third. down to 23 inches, and in fact the scientific assessment in 2007 also reduced it even farther, cutting it almost in half to a maximum of 6 to 17 inches. In An Inconvenient Truth, we're told that sea level will rise by an indeterminate period in time of about 240 inches. And comparatively speaking, you can see this is An Inconvenient Truth on the right, and you can see the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change assessments on the left. So you can see there is clearly a disconnect between what we're seeing in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and in other scientific reports, and in reality what we're seeing in the media. Remember though, sea level rise, glacial retreat, diminished sea ice, these are all associated with a warmer world. The real question we want to address is, why has the Earth warmed since about 1850? And to answer that question, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Willie Soon, who's going to talk about the carbon dioxide climate link.
Okay, thank you, Dave. By the way, Dave is really the most senior climatologist that I know. He's been studying climate, I would say, almost 40 years. He's been studying climate since he was a baby. I'm just a newcomer. I've been only studying for 20 years, so half his time. So you can see in combined total, we got 60 years of experience.